Hello there everyone. So welcome to another ride on the Interceptor 650. I've done around 650 kilometers so far. And I think today marks the 1 month anniversary of getting this bike. Well, I didn't actually get it on this date last month. I think this was the date when it was invoiced. So this was the date when the formal sale happened. I got the bike a couple of days after this. So yeah, 1 month roughly, 650 kilometers. Yeah, not that great, huh? So today I am going on a the target is to do around 200 or a little above that kilometers. So let's see how far I actually go. And the reason I haven't been doing really long rides, I'll tell you about that. I kind of want to do first impression or initial impressions video today. Things I like and don't like about the bike so far, things I've observed. So yeah, let's get started. So as you may have noticed, I'm still not very confident about cornering this bike. In fact, not just cornering, there are several instances when I feel a little less confident about handling this bike. And yeah, maybe that's expected when you ride a completely new kind of bike. Although, I mean, I have ridden standard bikes. What I mean by standard is, of course, the riding posture, the general ergonomics. But the last 7 years I have been riding the Sportster, which is kind of standard but a little more relaxed. Definitely a lot more upright and yeah, different. Your feet are more to the front, and the handlebars are higher. So, and even before that, I had been riding the Royal Enfield Bullet, which was also similar to the Sportster. So high handlebars, not that high, definitely much higher than this, and the foot pegs were a little more to the front. So pretty much for the last 11 years I haven't been riding any bike that's close to this one in terms of the riding posture. So maybe that's the reason why it's taking me longer to adapt to this one. I thought that was a speed breaker, but this is the one. So this is the road that goes from Hoskote, which is northeast of Bangalore, close to where I stay. And this goes towards Chintamani and Madanapalli in a northeasterly direction. I have taken this road earlier when I did the Horsley Hills ride on my Sportster long back. I'll put a link up to the series of videos up there. So good road, but there are lots of speed breakers. and some of them can be a little hard to spot, so you have to be really careful. You really have to watch out for them. So, initial impressions about this bike. Apart from the fact that it's taking a little longer for me to get used to it, to really push it, to ride more confidently, faster, taking the corners better. In terms of the performance, I'm quite happy with it. Like I said once in my earlier video, it perhaps pulls a little less than what my Sportster used to, but it's quite good. And I would say it's adequate, but of course when you say something is adequate, most people tend to think that it's just good enough for basic needs, but not anything more. But here, when I say it's adequate, I actually mean that it's good enough for even when you're looking for some thrills. If you really open the throttle, it gives you really good punch. So that brings me to one of my observations. It's really quite tame unless you really open the throttle. So again, drawing from my previous experience with the Sportster, that even at idle it had a lot of torque. If you just gradually release the clutch without giving it any throttle input, it would almost lurch forwards. But this one, I have actually stalled it quite a few times because I didn't give it enough throttle while moving off from a standstill. So when I was riding my Harley, normally I wouldn't need to give it much throttle input, and it would still behave in a pretty sporty manner. But this one, if you don't give it much throttle, it feels very tame. But yeah, if you give it enough throttle, it reacts. It does behave quite sportily. So that's one observation. And somehow you have to consciously make it go faster when you need to, because it won't do that by itself. With just a little throttle input, it'll just behave like a normal bike. Pretty much like any of these bikes, 150 cc's or so. And I'm not sure why Royal Enfield did that. Maybe because it's primarily, for the Indian market, and they had to make it more approachable for people upgrading from smaller bikes. So they wouldn't get overwhelmed by too much power. So that was a fifth gear overtake, guys. So yeah, the lack of a gear indicator, I am missing that, but again, I mean, all the bikes I have ridden earlier, all the bikes that I've owned earlier, none of them had gear indicators. So, you know, once you get used to it, you can tell pretty much which gear you're on just by the feel of it. But that takes time. So since I've done around 650 kilometers, I still had the 4000 RPM running in restriction. Once I cross 800, I should be able to go up to 6000 RPM. Remember on my Harley, which was a 5-speed, I was often looking for 6th gear. And even on this one, I am on 6th gear now, and I'm looking for 7th sometimes. So that's where having a gear indicator really helps. So you can quickly check which gear you're in, and if you're already on the top gear, you won't try to shift further. So as I was saying, you know, sometimes I stall this bike because the torque below 2000 RPM, it's a bit lacking. Although from 2000 RPM onwards, the torque curve is pretty much flat. So you get pretty much full torque right from 2000 RPM onwards. But below that, it's a little, you know, lacking. But I think that's quite common for most motorcycles. It's only Harleys and some of those kind of cruisers. They have very high torque from pretty much idle RPMs. If you think about some of the inline fours, even they have that problem. They may be really powerful, but low down the torque is really lacking, so people often stall them, and they have to give them a good amount of throttle to get moving. So about the riding posture, it's good. And you know, initially when I had the test ride, I told you that it's a little sporty. Not really sporty, but because of my prior experience, it felt a little sporty to me. And then later on, I think during my last ride video, I said that I'm actually liking the riding posture. And while that's true, I like the riding posture, but it's a little uncomfortable for me in some aspects. So why is that? Primarily I feel some discomfort in my hands, not my wrist, like most people have when the riding posture is leaning forward too much. For me, it's in my hands. And initially I felt that the grips were too thin, so I got these Trip Machine Company leather grip wraps, and they have increased the width a little, and I think the discomfort in my hands, that's also reduced significantly, but it's still there. And I mostly have it in city conditions, and while I'm not 100% sure what's exactly causing it, I have some theories. For one, I think the levers, the clutch and brake levers, are a little too far from the handlebar grips, so the reach is a little longer. And well, I can comfortably reach them, but I have to like really stretch my fingers in order to reach them from the farthest position. So, and what happens is especially for my right hand. In the city, when I'm braking, or pretty much anywhere when I'm braking, at least two of my fingers are on the lever, and I'm decelerating, so I kind of have to support my body with my hands, right? And since at least two of my fingers are on the lever, most of the weight has to be taken by my thumb, or this part of it, this part of my hand, you know. So so there's a lot of weight that my thumb or the thumbs on both hands have to take. So that kind of tires them. And also when they're already tired and you have to stretch your hand to reach the lever, that kind of causes further stress. So I think that's the main reason. Of course, the width of the grip, I think that was a factor, but now after putting on these wraps, I think that's the grip, the width of the grip is quite okay now. So I think raising the bars using some risers, that should help, because you know, the lower the bars are, the more you have to depend on your thumbs to support your body weight when you're decelerating. Because I never had this problem on my Harley. That was of course much higher, almost like chest level. So the higher they are, the more of your palms can be used to support yourself, and the lower they are, you have to use more of your thumb. So I am considering getting some risers. Now of course there are quite a few choices in the market. The cheapest ones are those cylindrical spacers, you know, that you put on below your existing risers with some longer bolts. But I'm not sure how sturdy they'd be, because you're pretty much depending on longer bolts to support the entire setup. And I think the longer they are, the more likely they are to break, isn't it? And then there's the Motown Customs ones. I really like them because they not only lift up the handlebars a little, they also bring them back towards the rider slightly. And those are complete risers. They don't reuse the existing risers. But of course, they are much more expensive. They are around like 10 times more than the other spacer type setups that I was talking about. And there is an Indian manufacturer as well that makes risers similar to the Motown ones. Similar as in they look quite different, but they also lift up the handlebars and bring them back towards the rider. And I think they're even slightly higher than the Motown ones. I think these are 2-inch risers, whereas the Motown ones are just 1 inch. But the thing is, when you lift it higher, there's a chance that you'll be stretching your cables and brake line and so on. And this manufacturer even says that you should reroute your brake line ideally, and that I think is something I can't do by myself at home. I think because if I need to like completely disconnect the brake line and reattach it, that's something I can't do. If I can just remove the brake master cylinder from the handlebars and then you know, do the rerouting that way, that would work probably, but I'm not sure if I can actually do that. So yeah, I haven't decided, but I'll probably be getting some risers. But today I have been riding for what, I don't know, maybe about an hour so far. Not really noticing much discomfort. I notice it more in the city rides because of course I'm braking more often, and I am accelerating and decelerating more often. And I also notice some discomfort sometimes on my left hand because of the clutch use, say in traffic. Although the clutch itself is pretty light, it's a slipper assist clutch, so the spring is not very strong. It's pretty light, but yeah, the travel is quite a bit, So yeah, so this other Indian manufacturer who is making those 2-inch risers, they also have foot peg relocations, so you can move them forward. So with those risers and those peg relocations, it would be a lot more like my Sportster or my earlier Royal Enfield Bullet, so that is something I could do, but I think I'm okay with the current foot peg location. A bit sporty, but that's a good thing sometimes, I'm not noticing that much discomfort from the foot pegs themselves. Now the seat. This is something almost everybody complains about on the Interceptor. It's really not suitable for long rides, and I think that is true. Although I haven't really done any rides long enough to test that. So even now, I probably have been riding for about an hour, and it's not uncomfortable yet, but it's starting to get uncomfortable, So maybe in another 2 or 3 hours, I think that'll be it. I won't be able to go on anymore. So yeah, if you're looking for a full day ride, I don't think you can do that on the stock seat. Now of course Royal Enfield has touring versions of the same seats. So you have the Interceptor and you have the Continental GT 650. Both bikes have the same chassis, the same frame, so the seats are interchangeable. And the stock seats for both of them are soft, so they're not really ideal for long distance touring. And but you get the touring versions, which are a little firmer, and they're meant to support your butt a little better. So they're supposed to be better for long distance touring. And since the seats are interchangeable between the Interceptor and the Continental, some people prefer the Continental seat over the Interceptor because it's a little more flat, a little wider. But one more thing this seat lacks is it's pretty much flat from the front to the back. So there isn't that slightly raised part that most bike seats have that support your tailbone area. So because of that, your tailbone doesn't get any support, and that is one thing that gets a little uncomfortable after a while. So the Continental, it has a bit of that curved or raised part, which would hopefully support your tailbone a little. So if I do get one of the Enfield touring seats, it will probably be the Continental version and not the Interceptor version. But there are of course other seat manufacturers as well in India. Some of them are quite a bit less expensive than the Royal Enfield options, although the Royal Enfield ones themselves are not that expensive. They're quite reasonable. So yeah, as for those seat options, I have to see some reviews or some reports on how they actually are, you know, because most people initially prefer softer seats, so they like them when they're soft, but actually a very soft seat is often not ideal for long distance touring, because you sink in the seat and you don't get support at the right places, you know. So only when somebody has actually tried a seat for longer durations can they actually give you an actual idea of how they are like for longer distances. So how is it like on these bumpy roads? Doing around 70. Yeah, you can feel the bumps, but they're not like bone-jarringly uncomfortable. It's quite okay. So for the ergonomics, that's pretty much it. The handlebars need to be raised, I think, and I think that should help, if not completely solve the problem. And the rest of it is okay. And yeah, the seat needs to be changed. So I'm still researching on both the risers and the seat. So once I have decided and get them, I'll of course let you know. Okay, I think I'll stop somewhere here because the seat discomfort is starting to kick in, and I'm not sure if I can continue doing the entire route as I had previously planned. I may have to turn back here. Let's see, huh?